You always look like you're about to run when I get close. That was the first thing Mason Brooks ever said that made me forget how to breathe. Not hello. Not nice to meet you. Not what are we doing with your hair today. That came later. The running thing came after his fingers brushed the back of my neck for half a second too long, and my entire body reacted like he had just told me a secret. I should probably back up. I found Mason's shop 2 years ago on a Friday afternoon when Chicago was doing that miserable thing where the wind hits you from every direction at once. I had just moved into a third-floor apartment with a radiator that clanked all night and a kitchen window that wouldn't fully close. I was 28, freelancing, over-caffeinated, and trying to look like I had my life together even though I was eating cereal out of a coffee mug because I hadn't unpacked bowls yet. The barber shop was 3 blocks from my place, squeezed between a dry cleaner and a little Mexican bakery that always smelled better than anything had a right to. I only went in because my hair looked terrible before a client meeting. That was it. Nothing dramatic. No sign from the universe. Just me, cold and annoyed, pushing open a glass door while a tiny bell rang above my head. The place was warm. Too warm, almost. Clippers buzzing. Low music from a speaker near the register. Some guy in the corner laughing at something on his phone. And then Mason looked up from sweeping hair off the floor. Black t-shirt. Faded jeans. Sleeves pushed up. Calm eyes. The kind of face that didn't need to try very hard. "Walk in?" he asked. I nodded like I had temporarily forgotten English. "Yeah, if you've got time." He checked the clock, then the empty chair near the mirror. "For you? I can make time." I laughed because it sounded like a line. It had to be a line. Guys like him said things like that to everyone. It was probably good business. Make the nervous customer feel special, get a decent tip, move on. So I sat down and told myself to be normal. Mason draped the cape over me, snapped it gently at the back, and his knuckles brushed my collar. My stomach tightened. Ridiculous. Completely ridiculous. He hadn't done anything. What are we thinking? He stood behind me, looking at me through the mirror instead of directly, which somehow made it worse. Shorter on the sides. Not too short, though. I have a client meeting next week, and I need to look employable. His mouth twitched. Employable. Got it. That's the technical term. Good thing I'm a professional. He started with the clippers, and for the first few minutes, I relaxed. Mason was easy to talk to. Not pushy. Not fake. He asked what I did, where I'd moved from, whether I liked the neighborhood yet. I gave safe answers. Graphic designer. Milwaukee originally. Neighborhood seemed fine. He remembered every little thing like he was collecting them quietly. When I mentioned the client meeting again, he tilted my chin a little to check the fade and said, "Then we'll keep it clean, not corporate sad." I smiled before I could stop myself. Corporate sad? You know the look. Unfortunately, yeah. His fingers combed lightly through the top of my hair, and my eyes accidentally met his in the mirror. The room got quieter. Not actually. The clippers still buzzed. Someone still laughed in the corner. But for one weird second, all of it felt far away. Mason didn't look away first. I did. Of course I did. I stared at my own knees under the cape and told myself it meant nothing. He was cutting my hair. Looking was part of the job. Touching was part of the job. Being charming was probably part of the job, too. When he finished, he brushed loose hair from my neck with a soft little towel. That should have been normal. It was normal. Except his hand slowed near my collar, and my pulse jumped so hard I was afraid he could see it. "You okay, Ethan?" I blinked. I'd told him my name once, maybe 20 minutes earlier. "Yeah." "What?" Mason's eyes lifted to mine in the mirror. "You got real quiet." "Just thinking about the meeting." "Lie. Terrible lie." He smiled like he didn't believe me, but he didn't call me out. At the register, I paid, tipped too much, and grabbed my coat like leaving quickly would make me less obvious. Mason leaned one hand on the counter. "Same thing next time?" I should have said sure. Something casual. Something normal. Instead, I looked at him and forgot how casual worked. "Next time?" His smile softened. "Hair usually grows back. Right?" "Yeah. Science." He laughed under his breath, and I hated how good that sound felt. I walked to the door, already telling myself I was being stupid. He was just friendly. That was all. Then the bell rang above me, cold air hitting my face, and Mason called after me. "See you next time, Ethan." I stepped onto the sidewalk with my chest tight and my ears warm, knowing I would come back. Not because of the haircut. The haircut was good. That was the excuse. The problem was, I already knew his voice would stay in my head longer than it should. The second time I went back to Mason's shop, I told myself it was because my hair actually needed it. That was not completely true. It had only been 6 weeks. My hair was fine. Maybe a little grown out around the sides, but not emergency barbershop grown out. Still, I booked the appointment online at midnight like a coward, then stared at the confirmation email for way too long. Mason Brooks. Friday. For 30. I tried not to think about how much better that looked than anything else on my calendar. When I walked in, the bell over the door rang the same way, sharp and tiny, and Mason looked up from the chair before I even said a word. Ethan Walker, he called, like we were old friends instead of a guy and the barber who had touched his neck once and ruined his ability to act normal. My stomach did something embarrassing. You remember my last name? Mason wiped his hands on a towel and nodded toward his chair. You booked online. Right. I sat down, trying to play it off. So you are not secretly obsessed with me. Good to know. His eyes flicked to mine in the mirror. Just for a second. Maybe 2. Never said that. I laughed because I was supposed to. Because that was clearly a joke. A normal joke. A customer service joke, maybe. Except Mason did not laugh right away. He just draped the cape around me, stepped close, and fastened it behind my neck with the careful focus of someone doing something delicate. His fingers were warm. My shoulders went stiff before I could stop them. Mason noticed. Of course he did. Same as last time. His voice was lower because he was standing right behind me. Yeah. I swallowed. You remember? Shorter on the sides. Not too short. Employable, but not corporate sad. I stared at him through the mirror. That was one conversation. I listen. That should not have hit me like it did. People listen all the time. Cashiers listen. Dentists listen. Uber drivers listen when you tell them where to turn. But the way Mason said it made my chest tighten, like he had handed me something I was not supposed to keep. The haircut started normal. Clippers. Small talk. The guy in the next chair complaining about the bears. Someone opening the door and letting in a burst of cold air. Mason asked how the meeting went, and when I told him the client hated every version except the one I almost deleted, he smiled like he understood exactly how annoying that was. Creative work sounds exhausting. It is. But you like it. I looked up. Most days. You smiled when you talked about it last time. I went quiet. Not because it was a big deal. It was not. It was just a detail. A tiny one. But Mason remembering how I smiled 6 weeks ago felt way too personal for 4:30 on a Friday afternoon. You notice a lot for a guy holding scissors near my head. His mouth curved. Part of the job. There it was. The safe answer. The one I could use to calm myself down. Part of the job. Being charming was part of the job. Remembering customers was part of the job. Looking at me like that through the mirror was probably also part of the job. Probably. By my 3rd appointment, he already had coffee waiting on the counter. Black. No sugar, he said when I glanced at it. Unless I made that up. I had not even remembered telling him. You did not. Good. He handed it over before I sat down. Our fingers touched around the cup. Barely anything. A stupid little brush of skin. Still, heat crawled up my neck like my body had no respect for me. Mason's eyes dropped to our hands. Then back to my face. Slowly. I pulled away first. Again. Thanks. You always get nervous when I do that. I almost spilled the coffee. Do what? Mason stepped behind the chair, watching me in the mirror with that calm, unreadable expression. Get close. My brain gave me nothing. Absolutely nothing. I forced a laugh that sounded fake even to me. Maybe I just do not trust people with sharp objects. That must be it. But his smile was too small. Too knowing. Weeks turned into months like that. Same chair. Same mirror. Same warm towel at the back of my neck. Same little comments that sounded harmless until I tried to sleep later and replayed them like an idiot. You look tired today. That hoodie is new. You always come in stressed and leave pretending you are not. I kept telling myself Mason was just good at his job. That was all. Good barbers made you comfortable. Good barbers remembered details. Good barbers made you want to come back. The problem was, by the end of the first year, I was not just coming back. I was looking forward to it. Planning around it. Feeling stupidly disappointed if he had to reschedule. And every single time I sat in that chair, Mason would meet my eyes in the mirror and say, "Same as always?" And every single time, I would answer, "Yeah, you know me." At first, it was just a line. Then one Friday, Mason paused with his hand resting lightly on the back of my chair. His gaze held mine through the glass a little too long. I do, he said quietly. And for a second, neither of us moved. The first time someone else noticed, I almost convinced myself they were joking. Almost. It was a busy Saturday, which already made everything worse. I usually booked Fridays because the shop was calmer then. Fewer people watching. Fewer reasons for me to act like a normal human being while Mason stood behind me with his hands in my hair. But he had been booked out that week, and I told myself Saturday was fine. It was not fine. The shop was packed when I walked in. 2 chairs full, 3 guys waiting, basketball on the small television near the back, somebody laughing too loud over the sound of clippers. Mason looked up from trimming a little boy's hair and gave me that small smile that always felt like it landed directly in my chest. I am running 5 minutes behind. No rush. I took the empty seat by the window and tried very hard not to look like I was watching him. Which meant, of course, I watched him through reflections instead. The mirror. The dark window. The glass frame of a poster on the wall. Pathetic, honestly. When the little boy hopped down, Mason dusted off the chair and nodded me over. My favorite 4:30. I sat down too fast. It is 1:15. Still my favorite. I laughed under my breath, because what else was I supposed to do with that? Before I could answer, Luis, the other barber, leaned around his client with a grin. Man, you do know there are other customers in here, right? The guy in Luis's chair chuckled. Mason did not even blink. He snapped the cape around me, smooth and calm. I am aware. Could have fooled me. Luis glanced at me in the mirror. Ethan gets the premium voice. My face got hot immediately. The what? Luis dropped his voice, terrible impression and all. You want coffee, Ethan? You look tired, Ethan. Let me save your exact appointment forever, Ethan. The shop laughed. Not mean. Just that easy, nosy barbershop kind of laughter. Still, my stomach tightened. Mason's hand paused at the back of my neck. Just a second. Then his palms settled lightly between my shoulders, steadying me like he knew I wanted to disappear through the floor. Luis talks too much. I speak truth. You speak because silence scares you. That got another laugh. I tried to smile along, but my pulse was still doing stupid things. Because Mason had not denied it. Not really. He had not said I was just a regular customer. He had not made some easy joke that would put everything back where it belonged. He just started cutting my hair, quieter than usual, eyes lifting to mine in the mirror every now and then like he was checking if I was okay. That was somehow worse. A few minutes later, an older guy waiting by the magazines pointed his coffee cup toward us. That your favorite customer, Mason? My throat went dry. There it was again. The kind of joke normal people were supposed to brush off. Mason combed the top of my hair back, his fingers careful near my forehead. His gaze stayed on mine through the mirror. Maybe. One word. That was all. The whole shop reacted like somebody had thrown a match on gasoline. Luis slapped his counter. See? I told you. The older guy laughed. The television kept going. Clippers kept buzzing. But I could not hear any of it right. Maybe. My brain grabbed onto that word and would not let go. Maybe was not yes. Maybe was not no. Maybe was dangerous because it left room for every dumb thing I had tried not to want. I stared at my hands under the cape. You are going to get me bullied in your own shop. Mason leaned a little closer to check the line near my temple. His voice dropped so only I could hear. I would not let them bully you. My chest tightened so hard it almost hurt. I looked up without meaning to. He was close. Too close for a crowded Saturday afternoon. Close enough that I could see the tiny crease between his brows, like he was being careful with me in a way that had nothing to do with hair. I wanted to say something funny. Something that would save me. Nothing came out. Mason's thumb brushed my jaw lightly as he turned my face to the side. Professional. Normal. Part of the job. Except his hand lingered after my head was already positioned. Neither of us moved for a second. Then Luis made a low whistle from across the shop. I am just saying, if this is a haircut, I have been doing it wrong for 12 years. Everyone laughed again. This time Mason did pull away. Fast, but not angry. More like he had been caught. And that was the problem. Because I saw it. The quick shift in his face. The way his confidence cracked for half a second before he covered it with a shake of his head. Finish your client, Luis. Gladly. Some of us work here. I forced a laugh, but my mind was somewhere else. Mason had been caught. Not joking. Not performing. Caught. When he finished, he took a little longer brushing hair from my neck. The towel moved softly over my skin, and my eyes stayed fixed on the mirror because looking away felt like admitting too much. You okay? Mason's voice was quiet again. I nodded. Yeah. You sure? I tried to smile. You asked that a lot. His hand lowered, but he stayed behind me. You dodge it a lot. That shut me up. For a moment, the shop noise faded again, the same way it always did around him. Then he stepped back, cleared his throat, and pulled the cape free. Hair slid to the floor between us like the spell broke with it. At the register, I paid and reached for my card too quickly. Mason noticed that too. Of course he did. Ethan. I looked up. He was leaning on the counter, expression softer now. Less Barber. More Mason. They were just messing around. I know. I did not mean to make it weird. That should have helped. It did not. Because weird was not the problem anymore. The problem was that for the first time, I did not think I had imagined it. I put my card back in my wallet and forced my voice to stay even. You did not. Mason watched me for another second, like he wanted to believe that. Like he maybe did not. When I turned to leave, Louise called out, "See you in 6 weeks, favorite customer." I rolled my eyes, but my face was burning. Mason did not laugh this time. He just looked at me through the mirror one last time, and the look stayed with me all the way home. The night Mason stayed late for me, I almost canceled 3 times. My deadline ran long, my laptop crashed once, and by the time I looked at the clock, my appointment had already passed. I stared at my phone with that sinking feeling in my chest and typed, "Sorry. Got buried in work. I can reschedule next week." Mason replied less than a minute later, "Come after close. I will wait." I read it twice, then a third time, because apparently I needed to make sure my brain was not adding words that were not there. I will wait. Normal Barber thing, I told myself. Totally normal. Businesses stayed late for customers all the time, right? That was what I kept repeating while walking through cold rain with my hood up and my stomach doing nervous little flips the entire way. When I reached the shop, most of the lights were off. The neon sign in the window glowed soft blue against the wet sidewalk. Inside, Mason was alone, wiping down the counter with a towel, sleeves pushed up, hair slightly messy like he had been running his hand through it. He looked up when I knocked. For 1 second, he just stood there watching me through the glass. Then he unlocked the door. "You look terrible." I blinked. "Nice to see you too." The corner of his mouth lifted, but his eyes moved over my face like he was checking damage. Long day, long week. I stepped inside, shaking rain off my jacket. The shop felt different without people in it. No clippers buzzing from every chair. No Luis making jokes. No television shouting about sports. Just the low hum of the lights, the smell of aftershave, and Mason standing way too close while he locked the door behind me. The click of the lock sounded louder than it should have. He nodded toward his chair. "Sit. Bossy. You are late. Technically, you invited me late. Technically, you look like you forgot dinner exists." I sat down before he could see me smile. "I had coffee." Mason gave me a look through the mirror. "That is not dinner. It is if you are committed." He shook his head, but a few minutes later, while the cape settled over my shoulders, he placed a wrapped sandwich on the counter beside me. Turkey, chips, and a bottled water. I stared at it. "What is that?" "Food." "Mason, eat after. Do not make it weird." Too late. My chest had already gone tight in that stupid, soft way I hated. It was just a sandwich. A sandwich should not feel intimate. But it did. Because he had thought about me being hungry before I even got there. Because he had waited. Because the shop was empty, and all the usual excuses were gone. He started cutting in silence at first. Not awkward silence. Something heavier. His fingers moved carefully through my hair, slowing now and then as if he had nowhere else to be. I tried not to watch him in the mirror. Failed. Mason caught me once, and instead of looking away, he held my gaze until I had to glance down. "You have been avoiding Saturdays," he murmured. My stomach dropped. "Have I?" "Ethan. Just my name. Quiet. Tired. Too familiar." I swallowed. "I have been busy." That is one answer. The scissors paused near my temple. Not the honest one. I let out a small laugh, but it did not land. "You always do that." "Do what?" "Make people feel like lying is pointless." His expression shifted. Softened, maybe. "Only people I care about." The room went still. I knew there was rain outside because I could see it sliding down the front window, but I could not hear it anymore. I just heard my own pulse. Mason seemed to realize what he had said at the exact same time I did. His jaw tightened slightly. He looked back at my hair, like the fade suddenly required all his attention. I should have let it go. I should have taken the safe exit. Instead, Because apparently I had no survival instincts left, I whispered, "You care about me?" Mason's hand stopped. His fingers were still near my hairline. Not touching, not quite. Then he set the scissors down on the tray with a soft metal click. Slowly, he moved around to stand in front of me. The cape was still around my shoulders. I probably looked ridiculous. But Mason was not smiling. He leaned back against the counter, arms crossed, eyes fixed on mine. "You really need me to answer that?" My throat went dry. There were maybe 3 feet between us. Then 2, because he pushed off the counter and stepped closer. Not fast, not dramatic, just close enough that my body forgot the difference between fear and hope. "I do not know what I need," I admitted. His eyes dropped for half a second, not in a way that felt wrong, just like he was thinking something he did not trust himself to say. Then he reached out and adjusted the cape near my collar, even though it did not need adjusting. His knuckles brushed my throat. My breath caught. Mason heard it. I know he did, because his hand froze. For 1 second, neither of us moved. His thumb rested lightly against the edge of the cape. My hand lifted from under it before I could think. I almost touched his wrist. Almost. Mason looked down at my hand, then back at me. The air between us felt too warm, too small. "Ethan," he whispered. Not a warning. Not exactly. More like he was asking permission for a question neither of us had said out loud. Then someone knocked hard on the front window. We both jerked apart like teenagers. Luis stood outside under an umbrella, holding up a forgotten backpack and grinning like he had just walked into the best moment of his life. Mason stepped back so fast his shoulder hit the counter. I stared at the floor, heart hammering. The almost touch still burned in my hand. Mason unlocked the door, took the backpack, and muttered something I could not hear. Luis looked from him to me, eyebrows raised. "Late haircut, huh?" Mason's voice went flat. "Go home." Luis laughed all the way down the sidewalk. When Mason locked the door again, the room did not go back to normal. It could not. He stood with his hand on the lock, back to me, breathing a little heavier than before. I stayed in the chair, pretending my whole body was not shaking over something that had not even happened. Finally, Mason turned around. His eyes met mine in the mirror. "We should finish your hair." I nodded. "Yeah." His voice was quieter when he stepped behind me again. "Eat the sandwich after." I almost laughed. Almost. But his hands were careful now. Too careful. And by the time I left that night, with my hair fixed and the sandwich warm from being held in my lap, I knew one thing for sure. Something had almost happened in that empty shop. And Mason knew it too. The thing about almost moments is they do not stay in the room where they happened. They follow you home. They sit beside you while you answer emails. They show up when you are trying to fall asleep, and suddenly you remember the way his hand froze near your collar, the way your own hand almost reached for his wrist, the way he said your name like it was a line he was afraid to cross. For a week after that late haircut, I acted completely normal, which means I acted insane. I checked my phone too often. I opened Mason's booking page twice and closed it immediately. I walked past the shop once on my way to the grocery store and took the long route back because seeing the blue neon in the window made my chest feel too tight. I was not avoiding him. That was what I told myself. I was just busy. Very busy. Busy buying oat milk I did not need from a store 6 blocks out of my way. Then, the next Thursday, I saw him outside the shop with another guy. I was across the street, half hidden behind a parked delivery van, holding a paper bag with frozen pizza, and a sad bag of spinach like that made me less obvious. Mason stood near the front door, one hand on his hip, laughing at something the guy said. The guy was tall, clean jacket, nice shoes, the kind of put together that made me suddenly aware I was wearing an old hoodie with a coffee stain near the pocket. Then the guy touched Mason's shoulder. Not a big touch, not dramatic, just familiar, easy. Mason did not move away. My stomach dropped so fast it almost made me dizzy. I stopped walking like an idiot. For a second, all the small things rearranged themselves in my head in the worst possible way. The late appointment, the sandwich, the looks, the almost touch. Maybe I had been reading everything wrong. Maybe Mason was just naturally like that. Warm, careful, good at making people feel chosen. Maybe the guy by the door was the person he actually chose when he was not standing behind a barber chair with his hands in my hair. The man said something, and Mason smiled wider. That was what did it. I turned around before Mason could see me. I told myself it was none of my business. Because it was not. Mason was not my boyfriend. He was not even my friend, technically. He was my barber. A guy who knew my coffee order and my haircut and too many details about my life. That was all. The next time I went in, I made sure to be normal. Not weird normal. Actual normal. I smiled at the bell. I sat in the chair. I said, same as always, before he could. Mason's eyes lifted in the mirror. You okay? Yeah. That was fast. What? The answer. He fastened the cape at the back of my neck, slower than usual. You usually pretend to think about it first. I forced a laugh. Maybe I am becoming decisive. Across the shop, Luis looked up from sweeping. Ethan becoming decisive? Big day for the neighborhood. I gave him a flat look. I have made decisions before. Name one. Coming here despite you working today. Luis pointed the broom at me. Okay, that was good. Mason smiled, but it faded when his eyes came back to mine. He knew. Of course he knew. He always knew when I was acting off, which was unfair because I had spent most of my adult life being off in a very private, controlled way. Halfway through the cut, a woman waiting near the front desk looked between us and laughed softly. You two always like this. My heart kicked once. Mason did not answer right away. His comb paused near my temple. Luis, because he had no survival instinct and apparently hated me, leaned against his broom. Oh, they are worse when they think nobody is watching. The shop got that little ripple of laughter again. My face heated instantly. Mason's expression closed just enough that I noticed. His mouth still smiled, but his eyes went careful. Luis. Just one word. Low. Warning. Luis lifted both hands. I am kidding. Then be funnier. The air changed after that. Not for everyone else. The shop kept moving. Clippers buzzing. Door opening. Somebody complaining about parking. But between Mason and me, something pulled tight. He finished the rest of my hair with professional distance. No lingering fingers. No quiet comments by my ear. No soft "you good" when my shoulders tensed. Just clean lines, careful work, and a silence that felt worse than any joke Luis could have made. I hated how much I missed the way things had been 5 minutes earlier. At the register, I tried to leave quickly. Mason caught my wrist lightly before I could take my receipt. Not hard, barely a touch. Still, I froze. His thumb left my skin almost as soon as it landed, like he remembered we were not alone. Did I do something? His voice was quiet enough that Luis could not hear. I looked at him. Really looked. He seemed tired. Not physically. More like he had been holding something back and it was starting to cost him. I thought about the guy outside. The hand on his shoulder. The easy laugh. The way jealousy felt ridiculous when you had no right to it. No, Mason's jaw shifted. Ethan, you did not do anything. That was the truth and the lie at the same time. He searched my face like he was trying to find the part one had hidden. Then Luis called from the back. Maze, your 2 o'clock is early. Mason let his hand fall. The distance came back immediately. A man in a navy coat walked in, shaking rain from his umbrella, and the moment was gone. Mason stepped away from the counter, but his eyes stayed on me. Take care of yourself, okay? It was such a small thing. He had probably said it 100 times to 100 people. But this time it sounded different. Careful. Almost sad. Like he was already backing up before either of us admitted there was something to back away from. I nodded, because my throat felt too tight for anything else. Then I walked out into the cold with a fresh haircut, a burning wrist, and the awful feeling that whatever had almost happened between us was already starting to disappear. For 2 days after that, I kept replaying Mason's face at the register. Not the almost touch from the late haircut. Not the way Luis kept making jokes. Just Mason standing there, tired around the eyes, asking if he had done something wrong without actually using those exact words. That was the part that messed with me, because I wanted to be mad at him. It would have been easier if he had been careless. If he had flirted because he liked attention. If he had made me feel stupid on purpose. But Mason did not feel careless. He felt like someone backing away from a fire he had helped start. I almost skipped my next appointment. I had the cancellation page open on my laptop, cursor hovering over the button, when my phone buzzed. Mason. No reminder. No shop number. Just a direct text from the number he had used once when I was running late. You free after your cut tomorrow? I stared at it, so long my screen dimmed. Then another bubble appeared. Coffee. Not at the shop. My heart started pounding. I typed 3 different answers and hated all of them. Finally, I sent ya. The next afternoon, the haircut itself was quiet. Not cold exactly. Just careful. Mason worked like he was trying not to touch me more than he had to. I pretended that did not hurt. Luis was there, but for once he seemed to read the room. No jokes. No favorite customer. Just a quick nod and his headphones in while he cleaned his station. When Mason finished, he did not ask if I liked it. He already knew I did. He just brushed the last bit of hair from my shoulder, stepped back, and glanced toward the door. Still good for coffee? My mouth went dry. Yeah. The cafe next door was small and warm, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and a tip jar full of quarters. We sat near the window, both holding paper cups neither of us drank from right away. Without the mirror between us, Mason looked different. Less untouchable. More nervous. I did not know what to do with that. He turned his cup slowly in his hands. You saw me last week. My stomach dropped. What? Mason looked up. Outside the shop. With Daniel. I felt heat crawl up my neck. I was not spying. I did not say you were. I just walked by. I know. His mouth pulled into something almost like a smile, but it did not last. You turned around pretty fast. There was no good answer. I looked out the window at people walking past with their coats pulled tight against the wind. I figured you were busy. Daniel is my cousin. I blinked before I could stop myself. Mason noticed. Of course he did. His shoulders relaxed a fraction, like that tiny reaction had told him everything. He helps with my lease stuff. Taxes. All the parts of owning a shop that make me want to fake my own death. I let out a small laugh, mostly because I needed air. That sounds healthy. Very. He looked down at his coffee again. He is also the person who keeps telling me I am an idiot. My fingers tightened around the cup. About what? Mason was quiet for a moment. The cafe noise filled the space between us. Milk steaming. Chair scraping. Someone laughing near the counter. Then he leaned back, eyes on me in a way that made it impossible to hide. About you. Everything in me went still. Mason. I know. He rubbed a hand over his jaw, frustrated with himself. Trust me, I know. You are my client. You come into my shop. People talk. Luis talks too much. And I kept telling myself I was just being friendly because that was easier. My chest tightened. Easier than what? He looked at me then, really looked, and the answer was already there before he said it. Then admitting I wait for your appointments. I forgot how to breathe for a second. Mason gave a quiet, humorless laugh and stared at the lid of his coffee. That sounds pathetic out loud. It does not. It kind of does. It does not. His eyes lifted again. Something soft moved across his face, like he wanted to believe me, but was scared to. When you left the other day, I hated it. The words landed slow. Heavy. I hated that you walked out thinking whatever you were thinking. I hated that I did not stop you. And I hated how normal I had to act when my next client sat down. My throat felt tight. I looked at my cup because looking at him was too much. I thought I was making it up. You were not. The cafe kept moving around us, completely unaware that my whole life had narrowed to those 3 words. You were not. Mason's hand shifted on the table, not reaching for me. Not quite, but closer than before. That night at the shop, he continued, voice lower now. When Luis knocked, my pulse jumped. Yeah, I was not joking around with you. He swallowed, gaze fixed on the small space between our hands. And I did not want you to leave. I could have said something. I should have. Instead, I sat there like an idiot while my heart hammered against my ribs. Mason finally looked up, and for the first time, he seemed just as scared as I felt. Not smooth. Not calm. Not the guy who always had a line ready in the mirror. Just Mason, sitting across from me in a crowded cafe, telling the truth badly because it mattered. I am not asking you for anything right now, he added quickly. I just needed you to know it was not one-sided. My hand moved before I fully decided to move it. Just an inch across the table. Mason noticed immediately. His eyes dropped to it, then back to me. Neither of us touched. Not yet. But this time, neither of us pulled away either. I should have felt relieved after Mason told me it was not one-sided. I did, for about 10 minutes. Maybe 12. We sat in that cafe with our hands, almost touching, drinking coffee that had gone lukewarm, both pretending the whole table between us was not charged with everything we had finally said out loud. Mason walked me back to the shop after, even though my apartment was the other direction. Neither of us mentioned it. Outside the barber shop, the blue neon hummed above the window, and for once, I did not feel like I was standing outside his world looking in. Mason had one hand in his jacket pocket, the other rubbing the back of his neck like he did not know what to do with it. So I managed. Brilliant. Very adult. He looked at me, and the corner of his mouth lifted. So, the sidewalk was busy enough that people kept brushing past us, but it still felt weirdly private. like the rest of Chicago had lowered its volume. Mason glanced at the shop, then back at me. I do not want this to get messy. My chest tightened before I could stop it. Right. His expression changed immediately. That came out wrong. No, it is fine. I heard myself say it too fast. It makes sense. Ethan, you have a business. I am a client. Luis already thinks he is hosting a reality show. I get it. Mason's jaw flexed. That is not what I meant. But the damage had already done what damage does. It slipped into every open space in my head and started building a case against me. Messy. That word followed me home. It sat on my kitchen counter while I ate toast for dinner. It showed up when I brushed my teeth. It was there when I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, remembering the way Mason had looked scared in the cafe and trying not to turn that into regret. By morning, I had convinced myself I needed to be the reasonable one. Because someone had to be. Mason had a shop, a reputation, employees, regular customers who watched everything like it was entertainment. I had been going there for 2 years. If this went badly, I would lose the routine. The chair. The mirror. The one place that had somehow become the best part of my week. And maybe Mason would lose more than that. So I did what I always did when something mattered too much. I backed up first and told myself it was kindness. I canceled my next appointment. Not dramatically. Just clicked the little link in the confirmation email and stared at the screen until it said canceled. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Mason, everything okay? I typed, yeah, just busy. Then I deleted it. Typed, work got crazy. Deleted that too. Finally, I sent, need to move some stuff around. Sorry. His reply did not come right away. When it did, it was only, no problem. Somehow that hurt worse than if he had pushed. 3 weeks passed. My hair got too long at the sides. My mornings got quieter. I walked a different route to the grocery store, which was stupid because the new route added 8 minutes and passed a coffee shop with terrible coffee. But it did not pass Mason's window. That was the point. The worst part was how normal life stayed. Emails still came in. Rent still needed paying. My radiator still made that awful knocking sound at 2 in the morning. Nothing cared that I missed a man I had no official right to miss. Then one Friday, I saw Luis at the Mexican bakery. I had just paid for a bag of conchas when he stepped in, spotted me, and froze like he had caught a fugitive. Well, look who is alive. I closed my eyes for half a second. Hi, Luis. He looked at my hair, then at my face, then back at my hair, deeply offended. You know, this is basically disrespectful to the craft. I have been busy. Sure. He grabbed a tray, but his usual grin faded a little. Mason has been weird. My fingers tightened around the paper bag. That is not really my business. Luis gave me a look so flat it almost made me laugh. You both are exhausting. There is no both. Okay. He nodded slowly, like humoring a child. Then there is definitely no reason he keeps checking the schedule like your name might magically appear. My throat went dry. I looked toward the window, but all I saw was my own reflection in the glass. Tired. Stubborn. Hair too long. He said he did not want it to get messy. Luis's face changed. Not surprised. More like he finally understood the shape of the problem. Mason says dumb things when he is scared. I tried to smile. It came out wrong. Scared of what? Luis shrugged, softer now. Losing things, I guess. He paid for his coffee and paused at the door. For what it is worth, he is not acting like a guy who regrets anything. Then he left, and I stood there with pastries I did not want, feeling my chest crack open in the most annoying way possible. That night, I almost texted Mason. I opened his contact and stared at the blank message box until my thumb hurt. But before I could type, my phone buzzed first. Mason, I did not cancel your slot next Friday. Just in case. I stared at the words until they blurred. Then another message came through. I know I made it sound like I wanted distance. I did not. My heart started pounding so hard I had to sit down on the edge of my bed. A third message appeared. I just got scared of turning you into something people could joke about. You are not that to me. For a long time, I did not move. The apartment was quiet except for the radiator knocking in the corner and my own uneven breathing. I wanted to answer. I wanted to tell him I was scared too. I wanted to say I missed him, which felt too honest and too simple and exactly like the thing I had been avoiding. Instead, I typed one word. Friday? His reply came almost instantly. Friday. And somehow, that felt like stepping back toward the line neither of us knew how to cross yet. By Friday, my hair looked bad enough that pretending I was there for any other reason almost worked. Almost. I got to the shop 5 minutes early and stood outside with my hands in my jacket pockets, watching the blue neon flicker in the window. For once, I did not go in right away. I could see Mason through the glass, wiping down his station even though it already looked clean. Luis was nowhere around. The other chairs were empty. The television was off. Mason looked up before I knocked, like he had been waiting for the shape of me in the window. That did something to my chest I was not ready for. He unlocked the door and stepped back. Hey. Great. We were already doing amazing. I walked in, and the bell above the door sounded too loud in the quiet shop. Mason locked the door behind me, not in a dramatic way, just closed for the night. Still, the click made both of us pause. He noticed. I noticed him noticing. Luis left early? I looked around, pretending I cared about staffing. I told him to. Mason folded the towel in his hands once, then unfolded it. I did not want an audience. My mouth went dry. For the haircut? He looked at me through the mirror, not smiling. No, one word, and there it was. The thing between us, standing right in the middle of the room, tired of being ignored. I sat in the chair because my knees felt untrustworthy. Mason came behind me, but he did not put the cape on right away. His hands rested on the back of the chair, not touching me, close enough that I could feel him there. I am sorry, he started. For saying messy. I looked down at my lap. You were not wrong. I was. His voice was quiet, but firm. I made it sound like you were the problem. My throat tightened. I know what you meant. No, you heard what I said. There is a difference. That made me look up. His eyes met mine in the mirror, and for once he did not hide behind the easy Barber version of himself. No smirk. No line. Just Mason, looking a little scared and completely done pretending. I got scared because people were watching, he admitted. Luis. Customers. Anyone who walks through that door and thinks they get to turn my life into a joke. His fingers tightened slightly on the chair. But then I backed away from you, and that was worse. I swallowed. I thought you regretted it. Mason shook his head once. Fast. No. The answer came too quickly to doubt. Not that night. Not the coffee. Not any of it. The shop went quiet around us. I could hear the heater kicking on near the back. A car passing outside. My own breathing. Then why did it feel like you were trying to put me back where I belonged? I hated how small my voice sounded, but at least it was honest. Mason's face changed. Like that hurt. Where is that? I looked at him in the mirror. In the chair. Every 6 weeks. Safe. Easy. Something you could call customer service if anyone asked. He closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, he moved around the chair and stood in front of me. No counter between us. No mirror trick. Just direct. You have not been just a customer to me for a long time. My heart hit hard against my ribs. I tried to speak. Nothing came out. Mason crouched slightly, so we were closer to eye level, his hands hanging loosely between his knees like he was forcing himself not to reach for me. I should have said that earlier. I let out a shaky breath. Yeah, you should have. That surprised a small laugh out of him. Not happy. More relieved that I was still there. Fair. The silence after that was not empty. It was full of every Friday, every coffee, every stupid joke, every time I had told myself it meant nothing because nothing was safer. I looked at his hands, then at his face. I canceled because I was trying to make it easier for you. Mason's eyebrows drew together. Do not do that. Do what? Decide what I need and disappear. The words were soft, but they landed hard. I felt them in my chest. I was scared too, I admitted. Not of Luis. Not really. I was scared that if this went bad, I would lose the one part of my week that felt. I stopped, embarrassed by how honest it sounded. Mason waited. He did not rescue me. He just waited like the answer mattered. I forced myself to finish. Good. His expression softened so much I had to look away. Ethan. And I know that sounds ridiculous because it is a haircut. It is not a haircut. I looked back. Mason's voice had dropped, rough around the edges. Not to me. For a second, neither of us moved. Then his hand lifted, slow enough that I could stop him if I wanted to. I did not. His fingers touched my wrist lightly, right where he had caught me at the register weeks ago. This time, he did not pull away. This time, I turned my hand just enough that our fingers lined up. Not holding. Not fully. But close. The smallest possible yes. Mason looked down at our hands, then back up at me. I do not want to go back to normal. My pulse was loud in my ears. Me neither. The words came out before fear could dress them up as a joke. Mason breathed out like he had been holding that answer for weeks. His thumb moved once over the side of my wrist, gentle and careful. The shop around us felt smaller, warmer, like the whole world had narrowed to that one touch. Then he gave a quiet, nervous smile. I still need to fix your hair. I laughed finally. The tension cracked just enough for air to get in. Right? Very romantic. I am trying to be responsible. Terrible timing. I know. But when Mason stood and finally wrapped the cape around my shoulders, his hands were steadier. Mine were not. He fastened it behind my neck, then paused with his fingers resting there for one extra second. Not hiding. Not pretending it was part of the job. Just choosing not to rush away. Our eyes met in the mirror. Mason's voice was low, almost shy. After this, can we talk about dinner? My chest tightened, but this time it did not feel like fear. As in food. His smile warmed. As in a date, Ethan. I stared at him through the mirror, and for once, I did not look away. The haircut took longer than it needed to. We both knew it. Mason kept stepping back to check the shape like my hair had suddenly become a complicated architectural project, and I kept pretending not to notice that he was stalling. I did not mind. For once, the quiet did not feel like something we were hiding in. It felt like something we were making room for. The clippers buzzed softly near my ear. His hand tilted my chin once, careful and warm, and instead of panicking, I let myself look at him in the mirror. Really look. Mason caught my eyes and smiled like he was still getting used to being allowed to. That almost ruined me more than any flirting ever had. When he finally brushed the last bit of hair from my neck, he did it slowly. Not because he had to. Because he could. All done, he murmured. I looked at myself in the mirror, then at him standing behind me. So what is the damage? For the haircut? Yeah. Mason pulled the cape loose and let it fall away from my shoulders. On the house. I turned in the chair. Mason, you can pay for dinner. My stomach flipped so hard I had to grip the armrest. He looked nervous after saying it, like the date had already been said out loud once, but still scared him the second time. I like that. I like that he was not smooth right now. I like that his hand hovered near the counter, unsure where to go. That sounds unfair, I managed. Depends where you take me. You asked me. Yeah, but I am being generous. I laughed, and the sound came out softer than I expected. Mason watched me like he was memorizing it. That made my face heat, so I stood and grabbed my jacket too fast. Normal instinct. Exit before the feeling got too big. But this time Mason noticed and did not let it pass. Ethan. I stopped with one sleeve halfway on. He came around the chair, not rushing, not cornering me. Just there. You do not have to run. My chest tightened. Same words, almost. Different meaning. I slid my arm into the jacket and looked at him. I am not running. His eyes dropped to my hands, then back up. Good. For a second, neither of us moved. Then he reached for the light switches near the door, turning off the stations one by one. The shop changed around us. Mirrors went dark. The blue neon in the window became brighter. The chair I had sat in for 2 years looked different now, like it had been holding a secret for us, and was finally allowed to rest. Mason grabbed his coat from the back, locked the register, then paused by the door. Through the glass, I saw Luis across the street near his car, phone in one hand, pretending badly not to watch. Mason saw him too. I braced for the usual retreat. The small professional stepped back. The look that said later, not here. Instead, Mason opened the door, waited for me to step out, and then, right there under the blue neon, he took my hand. Not by accident. Not hidden behind a counter. Not quick enough to explain away. His fingers slid between mine, warm and steady, and he did not let go. Luis froze across the street. Then a slow grin spread across his face. He lifted both hands like he was accepting an award. Finally, he called. Mason closed his eyes for half a second. I am firing him tomorrow. I laughed, looking down at our hands because I still could not believe mine was allowed to stay there. You are not. I might. You like him. Unfortunately. Luis pointed at us from across the street. I heard that. Mason glanced over. Go home. You go on your date. My face burned, but Mason only squeezed my hand once. A small pressure. A quiet answer. He was not embarrassed. Not tonight. We started walking down the sidewalk toward the little place on the corner that sold burgers in red plastic baskets and always smelled like fries. Nothing fancy. No movie moment. No dramatic speech in the rain. Just cold air, streetlights, our shoulders brushing, and Mason's hand still holding mine like it belonged there. After half a block, he glanced over. "You okay?" I smiled before I could overthink it. "You ask that a lot. You dodge it a lot." "Not this time." His thumb moved gently against my knuckles. "Okay." And that was the thing I kept thinking about later. Not the date, though it was good. Not the burger he almost dropped because he got distracted laughing. Not even the way Louise sent Mason a text that just said, "Do not mess this up," followed by 6 clapping emojis. What stayed with me was the walk. The simple part. Leaving the shop together. Holding on where anyone could see. For 2 years, I thought Mason just knew how to make me feel like his favorite customer. I was wrong. I was never just that. I was the guy he kept making room for. The appointment he saved. The coffee he remembered. The almost he finally stopped running from. And when we went back 6 weeks later, I still sat in the same chair. Mason still stood behind me. He still looked at me through the mirror and asked, "Same as always?" But this time, when I smiled and said, "Yeah, you know me," he leaned down just enough for only me to hear. "I do." And for once, I believed him.